Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Hayner?
Here.
Councilmember Bannister? Here. Councilmember Griswold?
Here.
Councilmember Long?
Here.
Councilmember Grand?
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Eaton?
Here.
Councilmember Nelson?
Here.
Councilmember Smith? No. Councilmember Ramlawi?
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a motion, please, to approve the agenda, moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of the agenda, Councilmember Griswold. Councilmember Hayner.
Oh, thanks, Kathy. I was going to ask to move, if we could move DC1 to after our potentially scheduled closed session tonight. DC1 is, yeah.
Thank you. DC1 to after the closed session. Further discussion of the agenda? Can I have that, I suppose I should be voting on these things, shouldn't we? May I have that by acclamation? Sure, all right.
Okay.
Further discussion of the agenda as amended. I'm sorry.
Is it possible to have staff pull DS1?
I'm okay with that.
Yes. Pull it?
Yes.
So remove DS1 from the agenda? The city administrator indicates his assent. Just pull it from the agenda. Staff will bring it back, I assume, when it's right and proper.
Yeah.
I think it's just pulled off the agenda and then will be placed back on the agenda by staff at a time of staff's choosing. DS1. Sure, I guess, all right, so we're gonna do this more formally. There's been a motion to pull DS1 from the agenda. I assume there's a second. Second, Councilmember Lum.
Yeah.
Discussion?
I just find this approach highly irregular. And, I mean, are we going to just start pulling various things from the agenda at random? Obviously not. That was a bit of a rhetorical question. But I would like us to keep it on the agenda, and then if it's to be postponed, tabled, not discussed further, I want to hear what the concerns are relative to removing it. This is something that had been postponed to tonight's agenda, and so I would like to retain it, and then when it comes up in the agenda, just, kind of standard parliamentary procedure, if you will, then have a council member, anyone, move to postpone it, table it, whatever.
Further discussion?
Just because I think this is really irregular.
I guess we're at a roll call vote on pulling DS1 from the agenda. Roll call vote, please, starting with, this is on the amendment of the agenda to remove DS1. Roll call vote, please, starting with
Can
Councilmember
I,
Hayner.
can I ask a further question?
I'm sorry.
What is the parliamentary, Robert's rule that allows us to do what we're about to vote on?
I think council controls the agenda. Council controls its agenda.
Right, but when we remove something or postpone it, it comes up, we then do that. We don't just randomly yank stuff off the agenda like this.
I had Councilmember Ramlawi. Well, let me pause for a
Or
second.
can I ask the city
Let
attorney?
me make it,
Yeah.
pardon me. Does anyone really care if we bring this up? Councilmember Griswold, do you really care? Can we
Parliamentary procedure.
suspend this conversation and move on?
Thank you. I concur with my colleague, Councilmember Lum,
Great.
that I just find this a little odd, and I would like it to be, action taken on this when it comes up through our meeting, through our
Right.
discussion. It just, I don't I'll be voting against
I think
any
we're not going
type
to be
of,
voting.
thanks.
Councilmember Nelson?
I guess I would have to concur that this is perhaps something we don't need to talk about. However, I was going to say that since it was previously postponed, I didn't really have a problem pulling it, although it seemed to me that we would be tabling it, wouldn't we? I mean, that would be what
When
we would
get
be
to it,
doing.
not-
Fair point. Further discussion of the agenda as amended, that is to say with the removal, pardon me, with the altering of DC 1 to after the closed session. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just had a parliamentary question for our parliamentarian.
Councilmember Hayner, thank you.
So this is, even though we have control of our agenda, this is an item that's placed on the agenda by staff. And so does that mean that Mr. Lazarus has to move to, as that chief of staff, to have this moved?
No, you're in control of your, of the council agenda once it comes here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
This is an item that, council asks us to respond to. The response is on the agenda. If there's, as council as a whole would like us to take another action, that would be fine too. As the city attorney said, it's council's agenda. I'm open to either.
Thank you. All in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
And it was just a.
Pardon me, all opposed,
Aye.
I'll pull that vote back if I may. There has been one amendment to the agenda. That is to say, the move of
DC 1?
DC 1 to after the closed session.
Okay.
That is the sole amendment to the agenda. All in favor of the agenda as amended?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Are there communications today from our city administrator?
We do, Mayor. There are some interesting things in the administrator's report. So rather than go into those, I do want to celebrate some things that the city clerk has done. As you know, tonight is the kickoff of the presidential campaign and a pretty busy election season. So our clerk has been involved in a lot of things that'll make it easier for our public to vote, as well as support the council's priority of engaging more people in the electoral process. Ms. Beaudry was part of a national elections task force, which released its report on the Bipartisan Policy Centers Task Force on Elections. So her contributions, not only here locally but nationally, are significant and should be recognized. Along those lines, the city clerk's office also won a National Election Assistance Commission award for the Election Day Line Tracker, which they did in conjunction with the University of Michigan School of Information. We talk a lot about collaboration with our big neighbor down the street, and this is a great example of how we can work together to benefit our public. Along those lines as well, City Clerk reminds us that there's a new appearance of mailed absentee ballots, that they are blue, and they should not be mistaken for junk mail. So please watch if you've applied for an absentee ballot to make sure that you don't mistake it for something else. The February A2 Quality Water Matters update is also posted. I know that there's a loyal following of that, and that's available also. So those are the items of interest in the administrator's update, and I encourage you to read the rest as well. So thank you.
Thank you. We now come to public comment reserve, public comment reserve time. Public comment and opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we would be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker today is Mojan Savabiasafani.
Okay, well, I hope that you were all present when the EPA representative spoke very clearly about the fact that it could take up to decades, maybe 30 years, before EPA can say yes or no to cleaning up dioxin contamination of our waters. I think many of you were there. She was very, very clear about it. There is no way you could misread that. So this C1 proposal you have in front of you, which continues the same route, EPA road, to never ever cleaning up the dioxin contamination, is disturbing. The public is really sick and tired. I walk on the streets of Ann Arbor, people have had it. It's over 30 years. This thing is growing. We need to put the shovel in the ground and clean it up right now. We can't wait anymore. This EPA proposal is just another 30 years of useless waiting. Useless waiting. We just said, let us spend $1 billion to improve our schools. I voted yes for that. I am proud to pay more so kids in this town will have better schools. But I would also like them to drink better water. I don't want them to go to the yard where there is grass and they're playing, and we don't know if there is high levels of dioxin in it or not. I want them to play in the grass without worrying about their sucking up dioxin in their bodies. I want them to drink good water. So this city council and many before them have had this posture of, well, let us see. And that is just not good enough anymore. You heard from the woman from EPA. It could take up to 30 years for the EPA to, they might even say no. After 30 years of feasibility studies, they could very well say, no, we don't want to do it. So I encourage every one of you who are pushing for this resolution tonight that, we should go with the EPA. I am trying to tell you, remember what the woman said. Remember, it's been 30 years or more that this thing has been growing, polluting our waters, polluting our sources of drinking water. It's just simply a shame. I don't understand how you guys can sit there and take this to a next level of 30 years of waiting. How can you do that in honest goodness? How can you leave this for the children? How? It bothers me. And it bothers a lot of people, and I want you to speak up about it. And now you decided you're going to discuss it later. I mean, I don't understand. You're postponing talking about it, C1. What's going on? I'm really upset, and a lot of people are really upset. We don't want to leave this to the next generations. And I am really disheartened that people who represent my ward, Mr. Eaton, who has been here 7 years,
Thank
has
you.
done nothing to fix it. Fix it now.
Our next speaker is Blaine Coleman.
Thanks for giving me time to get the sign ready. I'm here also to talk about the fact that the city has taken 30 years to not clean up the dioxane, and the posture of the city council, as far as I can tell, is to take an additional 30 years to not clean up the dioxane, with the excuse that after 30 years the EPA might finish a feasibility study and might at that point decide to start cleaning up the dioxane if it sees fit. I mean, you add together 30 years, another 30 years, and another 30 years after that, before you know it, you're talking about a lot of years. Why am I carrying this sign tonight? I'm supposed to be talking about dioxane, right? It's really hard to talk about any social improvement while a war is going on for decades against the Arab world, against Arab civilization, and against Afghanistan, and against Pakistan, and against the Palestinian people, and against Somalia. This is the war posture that the United States has been shoving the world into for so many decades now. And we are supposed to talk about cleaning up the environment. We're supposed to talk about improving children's education. We're supposed to talk about mass transportation and housing and all these social improvements while a massive multi-trillion-dollar war is going on, killing millions of people. So yes, tonight I am also asking you to just put your shovels in the ground and clean up this dioxane contamination now. You can do it now, and I'm asking you to do it now. But I'm asking you against a backdrop that makes it really hard to talk about the needs of society, because the United States and its allies, like Israel, are so busy murdering Arabs. They're so busy murdering Afghans, Pakistanis, Somalis, and most boldly and outrageously, they're so busy murdering the Palestinian people. I hope this city council will not only put its shovels in the ground and clean up the dioxane contamination, but also finally allow the resolution against military aid to Israel to be heard.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Erica Briggs.
Good evening. I am here to draw your attention and the public's attention to DC4, a resolution to improve city council communications sponsored by council members Griswold, Eaton, and Bannister, and to ask you to vote against it. There are numerous problems with this resolution, but fundamentally it is misleading and exemplifies poor leadership. This resolution resolves to improve effectiveness by improving 3 components of governmental communications: collaboration, accuracy, completeness, timeliness, and transparency. By my count, that is 5 components, but that's just a minor criticism. The big issue is that this resolution doesn't appear to be about improving council communications or furthering those nice-sounding goals. Rather, it appears it is rooted in paranoia, a mistrust of staff and their recommendations, and somewhat obsessive need to micromanage staff. Among other things, the resolution resolves that a council member must be copied on any email or attachment containing the council member's name. It requires staff to record and report to council on meetings that they are holding with residents. And perhaps the oddest resolve, city staff and council members will continue to strive to make accurate statements and publicly correct inaccurate and incomplete statements as soon as practical. Let's examine that last bullet point. As council surely knows, given the power dynamic, staff is generally unable to challenge the accuracy of council member statements, and we can safely assume our professional and qualified staff is doing their best to provide accurate and complete statements to council. So while this resolve statement really amounts to nothing new, it points to a disturbing trend and theme we are hearing all too often from some members of this council. It suggests that if council does not agree with the statement of a staff member or disagrees with staff advice, it must be false. This sounds a lot like a tendency of some politicians to call the news that they disagree with fake news. It is the job of council to set policy, and indeed at times that may mean deviating from staff advice. But that can be done without suggesting that the facts and advice provided by staff aren't based on data and professional training. I urge you to oppose this resolution and further to strive for greater civility at this table, to treat our public servants with the respect they deserve, and to recognize that the way that you speak at this table and the resolutions that you introduce affect workplace morale and thus the productivity and performance of city staff and operations. Thank you.
Thank
Since
you.
I have one
Our
extra
next-
second. I
Oh,
also
my
just wanted to
apologies.
mention, no, it's okay. I just also wanted to mention that I also oppose DS3. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marilyn Wedenoya.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Wedenoya. I'm a retired social work professor from Eastern Michigan University, and I'm here representing the Citizens for Mental Health and Public Safety. Our main goal is to advocate for mental health funding, both in Ann Arbor and for Washtenaw County. Our website is a2mentalhealthmillage.com. And we're a group of concerned citizens advocating that the money allocated to the city of Ann Arbor from the November 2017 Mental Health and Public Safety Millage be used for exactly that, for public safety and for mental health programs. We also urge county officials to adequately fund mental health services in the county. Our focus is how should the millage revenue that be allocated to the city of Ann Arbor, how should it be spent? What is an appropriate level of funding for mental health programs from the general funds of the city of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, and the state of Michigan? We all know the current funding is inadequate, and more is needed for our most vulnerable and underserved populations, those coping with a mental health condition and their loved ones who support them. Glenn Nelson, also a member of our committee, will speak after me to talk more directly about the funding issues. When the millage was promoted, people thought they were voting to help meet this need of mental health issues and voting for the 2017 mental health and public safety millage. Unfortunately, some of those funds earmarked for mental health were diverted to another issue altogether. Though an important issue, it's not what people voted for. This was at the expense of our most vulnerable and underserved. Perhaps you thought no one would speak up for that group, but that is exactly why we are here. When a citizen votes for a millage, it's a sacred trust that what they're voting for will be what the money is spent for. We urge you to reconsider your earlier decision. There's still time. There's still years for this millage and for the funding to go to the area of mental health needs in the city of Ann Arbor. Please support the public trust of having people get what they voted for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Glenn Nelson.
I am Glenn Nelson, one of the leaders of Citizens for Mental Health and Public Safety. I appreciate this opportunity to present part of our budget recommendation of our group. The time is too short to present all of it. We will be doing other parts over the coming weeks. I will provide the clerk with copies of our complete recommendation. We welcome a dialogue with you if you see ways to make the recommendations even more effective in improving the lives of those living with mental health issues. I will emphasize 4 new initiatives, putting aside for now endorsements for several of the policies you currently support. Our group supports 2 new initiatives that primarily require leadership in changing culture and only small appropriations. The city administrator should be charged with 1, emphasize all city employees should conduct all facets of city business with attention and concern for those living with mental health issues. And 2, formulate and implement a plan to demonstrate Ann Arbor is an enthusiastic partner in the county-led effort to make Washtenaw County a stigma-free community with respect to mental health status. We suggest $50,000 be appropriated for the associated expenses of these. Third, we support a new approach to the funds from the millage focused on climate change actions in fiscal year 2020. We support appropriating funds for programs that serve both those living with mental health issues and those desiring actions to reduce our carbon footprint. For example, the funds could be used to install solar arrays dedicated to the electrical needs of affordable housing for those requiring supportive services, thus reducing the operating costs of this housing. You have appropriately stipulated that equity must be at the center of the A20 policy. And correctly stated, equity means everyone gets the support they need. There is no more equitable use of millage funds devoted to sustainability than uses which simultaneously improve the lives of those living with mental health issues. We recommend $950,000 be appropriated for these expenses. Fourth, our group supports the city becoming a partner in planning and funding a place, perhaps called an assessment center, which will accept juveniles picked up by the Ann Arbor Police, but it's not appropriate for them to go home, but not to juvenile detention. Every jurisdiction with the police department should share in this endeavor. There'll be more later since I ran out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Abu Ibrahim. Abu Ibrahim. Our next speaker is Molly Kleiman.
Hello, my name is Molly Kleinman. I serve as the chair of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission, but I'm not representing the commission this evening. My comments are my own. I'm here to encourage you to vote against DC3, the resolution to establish City Council Mobility Committee, which did not come before the Transportation Commission for review, despite being within the commission's mission. According to the Ann Arbor City Code, the Transportation Commission was established to foster excellence in the planning, design, construction, and maintenance of a sustainable and resilient multimodal transportation network for the city of Ann Arbor. The commission serves as an advisory body to the City Council and the Administrator on Transportation Policy with a focus on accessibility, mobility, equity, and safety for all. The purpose and actions of this proposed City Council Mobility Committee would duplicate the efforts of the Transportation Commission with less public participation and oversight. With the exception of representatives from the AAATA and City Council, transportation commissioners are unpaid volunteers who have demonstrated a deep commitment to improving our city's mobility systems for everyone, regardless of their mode of transportation. We are bike commuters and transit users. We are drivers and pedestrians. We are people with disabilities and parents of children, local business owners, and members of community organizations. We serve on this commission because we want to help make Ann Arbor a safer, greener, friendlier place to live, work, and learn. City Council already has a representative on the Transportation Commission. In 2019, that council member was absent from 5 of the 12 monthly commission meetings and missed more than half of 2 additional meetings. If City Council wants to work with staff and engage with the public and community organizations regarding the city's mobility policies, it should appoint a representative who will attend and participate fully in Transportation Commission meetings, instead of creating its own private committee that includes no members of the public and operates outside of the city's existing board and commission structure. City Council has given itself dramatically expanded power over the city's transportation system in the 14 months since the current majority took office. Council has taken for itself the power to cancel planned bike lanes and sidewalks. It votes on temporary lane closures and changes to parking configurations. It regularly overrules the recommendations of city staff and expert consultants, as well as the results of public opinion surveys that Council itself requested. Creating a City Council Mobility Committee would only further insulate council members from the wisdom, desires, and realities of people whose lives are different from their own. It would mean that rather than consult a diverse group of committed city residents on matters of mobility policy, City Council would consult only itself. I hope you all vote against DC3. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I would, as a member of the Council Administration Committee, like to remind all of my colleagues on council that evaluations for the city administrator and city attorney are due on February 7th. I myself had them go to my other instead of focus folder, so you may need to take a look and see if they're hiding there. If you search for the provider, you will find them. If you have any problems, let me know, and I'll get in touch with our consultant on that project. I would also just like to thank Ward 3 residents Sue Hansen, Robert Gordon, and Lisa Lemble for organizing our neighborhood addressing climate change for the Pittsfield Village neighborhood last week. Dr. Missy Stoltz from our Office of Sustainability and Innovation joined us there. It was it was very well attended at Pittsfield Elementary School. We had dozens of neighbors there who were able to ask questions as a group and engage in breakout sessions. I think every single resident who was there got to learn more about the city, what the city was doing to address climate change, and feel like they could be part of a solution and have input as we go forward. And I think there'll be some more opportunities that we'll be alerting you to in the future coming up for public input regarding those efforts. But to me, it was also just a great opportunity not only to have those conversations, but also for residents just really to learn about the expertise that we have on our staff, and to appreciate just the depth and breadth of what we had going on in the city related to climate change. So thank you to Dr. Stoltz for taking time out of her evening to spend time with those neighbors, and to all those neighbors for coming out.
Further communications from council. Councilmember Griswold.
This is really a public service announcement. I'd like to remind everyone listening that it is critical that you use our A2 Fix-It application to report sidewalks that have not been adequately shoveled and are free of ice, as well as streetlight outages. We had a senior in our community slip on an icy sidewalk and die just a few weeks ago. So for anyone listening, there's a reason why we need to keep our sidewalks free of ice and snow. I also serve on one of the SEMCOG committees, and I was given a report that I'll be sharing with council and hopefully putting in the council packet so the community can see it, about the improvement in the pedestrian crash rate that was realized in Detroit after they made a major investment in street lighting. And it shows just how critical street lights are for pedestrian safety. The last thing is I was asked to serve on another mobility committee, and this is the Mobility Technical Advisory Committee within the Office of Sustainability. So we do have many committees and task forces working on the issue of mobility at this time.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to send out my condolences to the friends and family of Mr. Derrick, who passed after slipping on an unshoveled sidewalk here in the city of Ann Arbor. Unbelievable. First Ward resident, Old Fourth Ward area, and just super nice, friendly guy, and really, really a great guy. So I move to have a couple quick comments. So AC1, which is a Sparkian report, I already sent an email to our LDFA liaison and Mr. Lazarus, because I expressed concerns that the report isn't completely transparent because we use code numbers to discuss the companies that we're investing in. And so I've asked for a key to that so we can find out what's going on, and hopefully we can work out a way that is actually public, becomes a public matter, because they're using a mix of public and private funds, but it's invested under the watchful eye of LDFA. They're sort of SparkX, sort of a vendor. It's not a little bit convoluted, but SparkX is a vendor for LDFA, so I think that's close enough that that's a public matter. And so I've asked for that to be provided, and hopefully that will be, and I've received assurances that there's reasons that it isn't in the public report, but I'm not so sure I agree with them yet. We'll have to see how that sorts out. Secondly, I moved DC1 after our closed session because we're going to get briefed on what happened at today's status conference, which I had the pleasure of attending with the Gelman's attorneys and our competent legal staff from all of the intervening parties. And so I'll let Mr. Postma brief us later on that, but that's the reason I hustled that to the end of our agenda, because I think it's worth the conversation we're going to have in the closed session. It's I'll just leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Bannister.
Councilmember Hayner and I would like to invite the whole community to join us on Sunday, February 9, for a Meet the Candidates for Washtenaw County Prosecutor. We are going to be joined on Sunday afternoon from 1 to 2:30 with Ariane Slay, Hugo Mack, and Ellie Savitt. And so that will take place at the Arrowwood Community Center, and everyone is welcome to join us on this important get to know the candidates. And then also, coming up at our next meeting of council on, it's not going to be on President's Day, February 17. It'll be the following day, Tuesday, February 18. And Legistar has not been updated yet with Resolution 3 for the Barton Drive Sidewalk Project, although the July Resolution 1 and 2 had indicated that the special assessments would be back on the calendar for February 18. So I just wanted to give a call out to the neighbors who are interested in that to feel free to email Councilmember Hayner and me with your latest thoughts about the sidewalk assessments as they are anticipated to be on council's agenda for our next meeting, February 18. Thank you.
Further communication from council. Councilmember Ramalawi.
Thank you. Just reading through the administrator's report, I noticed in the ordinance's second reading for tonight, where we amended the age from 16 to 25, but in this publication, I think it still shows the 14. As we're talking about climate change and issues that surround it. In fact, having an early meeting tomorrow with the constituent to help bring me up to speed with what that really means, what kind of actions really need to be taken if we're going to be serious about meeting that goal by 2030. I was thinking the other day that frankly, probably none of us will be up here in 2030. So we can make these promises and we can make these resolutions and commitments, but are we going to be up here in 10 years to be held accountable? This is brought up many times now since we've declared the climate emergency. Now every action that's being taken is being looked at through a new lens. I understand there was an invitation for members of our city council and the mayor to go to Germany to discuss climate action. We have members in our community who have some strong objections to this. I would offer that in 10 years from now, if we achieve our goals, we could take that flight. But I really do think it sends the wrong message to our community, to the taxpayers, to other members on this city council when we get on a plane and fly across the ocean using taxpayer dollars to talk about climate action. I don't know. Perhaps I'm missing something, and more can be explained to me as to why this will need to be have to happen. At this point, I'm unconvinced that this is a wise endeavor, and I urge to reconsider that invitation and politely reject it and say, when we meet our goals in 2030, we'll be there. And instead take that money and put it into measures that actually sequester carbon rather than emit carbon.
Further communication from council? I note that one member of the public who was here for who wished to be here for public comment, signed up for public comment, was not here, but then just arrived after council communication started. As we had fewer than 10 members of the public come speak, I'm asking council's acquiescence to having the member of the public give his 3 minutes. Any objection? So reopening public commentary, Mr. Ibrahim. 3 minutes. At your pleasure.
Evening. I want to address the council on a matter that I've been dealing with for the last 9 years. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Abu Ibrahim. I'm a 26-year-old. I've been a resident of Ann Arbor for the last 20 years, and so has my family members. My family owns a small business. We try to do what we can to get back to the community, stay out of trouble. I personally have no criminal record. I have no traffic record. But let me tell you what I've been dealing with for the last 10 years, almost 10 years. Last September, I was seeking a job at University of Michigan when they told me that I could not proceed with my employment because I was a felon, which didn't make sense to me. So I looked into it, got a ICHI report from the Michigan State Police, in which they list 8 pages of misdemeanors and felonies that have nothing to do with. I've been told that my name is linked to 44 other aliases, and I've talked to multiple members of council about this over the years to try to address it, try to fix it, what can be done about it. There's still no resolution to my problem. I have a huge target on my back every time I'm stopped by the police, whether I'm driving, whether I'm being detained, it doesn't matter. This has put my life in danger, it's added to my plight, it's got me kicked out of school, fired from jobs. I paid thousands of dollars in fines to the city of Ann Arbor. Fines that the city of Ann Arbor has told me, judges and police officers, that they know that aren't my fines, but I have to pay them anyway, which doesn't make sense to me. I was scheduled to meet with the chief of police last week when he unexpectedly canceled my meeting. I'm not really sure why. After I put in my complaint last September with Lieutenant Bonnie Tile of the Ann Arbor Police Department, Professional Standards Division, she recently told me in January that this complaint has been reviewed and all the officers involved with my complaint were exonerated. This complaint is tied to a video, a dash cam video of 4 officers coming to my house in the middle of the night, harassing me, interrogating me, illegally holding me, and then taking me to jail legally without any charges. I've asked that the police department release this video to the ICPOC and the Human Rights Commission. They still have not received this video, and the investigation has been closed as it pertains to my complaint. So I just wanted to let you guys know, just let you know what's going on, make you aware of the situation, and that, well, now it's public information now, so thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointment that was presented to council for consideration at the January 21, 2020 regular session meeting to the Board of Review, Panel 2, Robert White. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Eaton, second by Councilmember Smith. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. We now have before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Hayner.
With the body's indulgence, I'd like to remove CA5 and CA9 for discussion.
Further discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Eaton.
I don't want to pull the item, but I do want to comment on CA2. Annually, the NIT, which is now known as the Alliance, brings a conference to town. A lot of people come, a lot of people spend money in our town, and we're really fortunate to have them come because they've removed their presence from other states after the states passed right-to-work laws. This is basically a labor organization. But they maintain their presence here because, in fact, Ann Arbor is friendly to labor. Ann Arbor has a local ordinance on prevailing wages, and so they recognize us as the kind of allies that they would like to associate with. And so they've maintained this activity in our town, and we're fortunate to have this.
Further discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarifying question. CA7 is lined through. Are we to interpret that we're not voting on that this evening?
That's correct. 7 and
Okay.
11 removed by staff.
Thank you.
Further discussion of the consent agenda. All in favor of the consent agenda with the exception of CA5 and CA5, 9, and of course 11 and 7. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda, with the exception of CA5, 9, 7, 11 is approved. With 11 council members present, all vote in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA5, CA6, pardon me, not CA5, my apologies. CA6, thank you. CA5, resolution to approve Riverside Park parking lot land lease with the University of Michigan, moved by Councilmember Grand, second by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of CA5. Councilmember Hayner.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I sent to our clerk a whereas and resolve clause I'd like to add to this resolution, and I'll read them out loud. The whereas clause is, whereas the City of Ann Arbor announced a climate emergency calling for immediate reductions in carbon emissions, and the resolve clause is, resolve these 18 parking spaces shall be reserved for zero emissions vehicles. And so the reason I'm asking for this is not that we don't see the benefits of renting spaces in our parking lots to university in a partial manner. That money goes into the Parks General Fund, which is needed and used. But I, as Councilman Ramwali spoke to just a few moments ago, we need to be looking at every action the city takes through this lens of this climate emergency that we all agreed was upon us. And so if we have an opportunity to sublease some of our property for a certain use, we should make sure that that use doesn't bring 18 carbon cars into our city every day. And it's one of the few opportunities we have to lean on the university to uphold their end of it. And I really believe that it's appropriate and right to suggest that they say, hey, that's prime spots for zero emissions vehicles. Whatever type they are, that fits that broad definition, I'm happy to welcome 18 zero emissions vehicles into these parking spots. Otherwise, I don't think we should do it. It's bad enough that they're putting over 1,000 in 2 parking structures in that same neighborhood. And so that's my, I move to amend that resolution to have that whereas and resolve clause.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Councilmember Hayner, you stole the floor. Do you want?
Well, it's pretty self-evident, I think, after that explanation, why I think we should be doing this. We've told ourselves that we need to look for opportunities to leverage our relationship with the university, and they exist and come before us all the time, and this is one of them, and I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity.
Discussion of the amendment. Councilmember Eaton.
So I'd like to ask the sponsor of this amendment if he would consider a number lower than all. If you look at just the demographics of car ownership right now, there's no group that has 100% electric vehicles at this very moment.
Well, I mean, you can name a number, but we actually lease 600 spaces citywide to the university in between all our structures and parks, including Fuller Park. And so this is just one opportunity to chop away at that, and so feel free to put forward a number.
I release my time to Ms. Lum there.
Well, I've got Rumlawi, Ackerman, Lum on the queue. Then Grant. Councilmember Rumlawi.
This is on the amendment, not
On
on
the
the main
amendment.
motion. We'll want to speak on the main motion as well later. On the amendment, is there truly a zero emissions vehicle? Even, your electric vehicles will, require that electricity produced with carbon, unfortunately. So we end up not having a zero carbon, in actuality. I do appreciate the spirit that this is coming under. I do want to speak to it under the main motion when we talk about it more, but I just pause to say I don't think there's, effectively zero carbon emissions with how we produce energy.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a couple thoughts. I think on its face, I don't have anything against this. I would like to give the University of Michigan a chance to respond to it. So if this passes, I'd like to postpone this. And I like the idea, if we're going to start the conversation, at least start high with all of them and see where it goes. The only other thought I have is, this is on Parks ground, and this would require a fair amount of infrastructure to be laid down. And it was my understanding that ideally we would no longer have, we would move the university off of this site and use it again in the future as park, and encouraging the university to lay down EV infrastructure seems like would be counterintuitive to those goals, or counterproductive to those goals. So a couple thoughts there. I think, again, on its face, don't have anything against it, but if it does pass, I think it'd be good to postpone to give the University of Michigan a chance to respond.
Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. To the amendment, I appreciate the question that was posed by Councilmember Eaton and then commented on by Councilmember Lowey about, zero emission vehicles. And my concern with regard to the amendment is this requirement would not only be made of the university, that folks who use these 18 spaces, and I will say this, understanding the spirit with which you're making this proposal, but we're leasing these spaces from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., which is a good arrangement. We, make a bit of money for Parks and Rec, which is where this money accrues to, and but also the parking is available for park use in the evenings and weekends. So it's not this amendment wouldn't affect just the university folks, but also presumably the others who are going to be using these 18, the park users. in the evenings and on weekends. So I don't know how that would play out, and I don't know if there's someone here from Parks and Rec? Mr. Lanafeld? Is that- Thank you. Appreciate your being here.
My pleasure. Yes, I would agree that the university uses these spots for about 33% of the week, from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then the rest of the time is for park users. In regards to making it low emissions vehicles only, that would limit the park users' ability. So for those 18 spots, and when there's only 18 spots at Riverside, it would be hard to make them all low emissions, but I would agree with Councilman Ackerman that we'd probably want to talk with the university as well if this was approved by council.
Thank you, Mr. Landefeld.
If I may, two things.
Hold on.
Oh,
I got a cue here.
oh, okay.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. So part of the reason that I don't understand why Councilmember Hayner's bringing this forward right now is partly process issue. He sits on the Park Advisory Commission and had the opportunity to bring this up when it was recommended to council. So I'm a little confused about the timeline. Also, it's just that this is a pre-negotiated contract, which my understanding of that is that it goes both ways between the city and the university. So I don't think that it's actually, if we want to send it back to Parks, I'm not in favor of that. I think this is a really favorable arrangement. It is a highly used park. It's used for things like recreational field games where people do come from different places, and I think it is realistic that we have parking for those users. It's adjacent to a path that takes you to one of our, most highly used amenities in the city, which is the Argo Cascades and the Argo Livery. So there are real reasons why we want Parks users to be able to come and park at this spot. I don't actually think I'd be in favor of getting rid of all of these 18 spaces and hope that everyone would bike or walk to that site, because being able to drive and park here actually enables people to have access to a really, important non-motorized asset where they can recreate in our community. And so to be able to get some money and to be able to leverage the fact that the university uses this for gold passes, we can actually get more money from them. I would assume that if we were going to be asking for, electric vehicles, that we would have to make really significant investments in our infrastructure, because some people are commuting in and using these spaces, and I think it's a safe assumption that they would want to charge those vehicles if they were paying, a couple $1,000s a year for a parking pass to park them there. So I won't be supporting the amendment. I appreciate where it comes from, but I think this just misses the mark.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, if you'll read my simple whereas and resolve clauses, I make no mention of requiring EV infrastructure. I'm simply saying I'm tired of having cars come down into our neighborhood when we're in the middle of a climate emergency. It's terrible for the air, it's terrible for the climate, it's terrible for our carbon counting. Also, I didn't suggest in any way that we get rid of these spots, nor that we require city users to have low emissions vehicles only. We're talking about posting a sign that says Gold Pass, low emission vehicle, or zero emission vehicle only. And if we can't push on the university to do this in this tiny way, what was the point of declaring a climate emergency? Should we move to rescind that? Every opportunity, everything that we do on this council has to be seen through the lens of that emergency that we declared. If we don't, we're going backwards. And so it's just a matter of how is it posted. That's a straw man, EV infrastructure. It's a straw man that I want to get rid of the spaces. Those spaces are there. I want them to be used properly and consistent with our declaration of a climate emergency. That's all.
Further discussion, and perhaps we can move this along. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hayner, if we misinterpreted, I apologize. The language is shall be reserved, which is the firmest language can be. That shall be implies must be.
For university users. This is referring to the university
Oh,
portion
it's
of
not,
the
though.
contract.
It's not in the language.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lum?
And just to reiterate, that these 18 parking spaces, 2/3 of the time, they're used by John Q. Public, Jane and John Q. Public, who were there to access our parks.
Sure. I don't have a problem with the city. I'm
Well,
talking about the
This says
university.
that these 18 spaces shall be reserved for zero-emission vehicles. There's
In
no,
our lease language with the University of Michigan, not with residential users.
but it doesn't, as proposed, it doesn't specify that.
Mr. Postma, can you resolve this issue?
On the grammar of it,
Does this resolve clause relate exclusively to the lease, or is it would it, if passed, alter the use of the spaces in total for city users as well?
and I have to look at it, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Councilor Nelson, in the meantime?
I apologize, but I can't support this just because of the logistics that I know from having driven a hybrid vehicle and how many miles I had on a single charge. If you don't invest in infrastructure at this location, you have limited the category of users that can make use of it if they're commuting any distance at all. And so I just, as a practical question, I don't think the university would even have any reason to rent these spaces from us at all if the restriction was drafted this way.
Councilor Eaton?
Thank you. So I seconded this, but I won't be supporting the amendment. I think that we have to give some lead time to staff to negotiate these kind of terms. Last Friday, we Councilmember Grand and I sat down with staff to talk about the Fuller Road parking lot leases, and we're looking ahead on those. And so it's that, looking that far ahead that we should be doing rather than amending it after the negotiations are complete. So I would suggest that this kind of idea come up well before a lease is coming for our approval. And so I would encourage you to write to staff and tell them your concerns about the Fuller Road parking lots, because there's hundreds of parking spaces there that we lease. And you might actually be able to make more of an impact than these 18 spaces if you turn your attention to the August lease that we're currently negotiating rather than this particular one.
I've got Councilmember Smith, and then perhaps we can move this fellow along to a vote. I think we all kind of know where each of us are going, perhaps. Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, I'm not going to support this, but I think it's important to talk about this because as we talk about EV infrastructure, this is an important deficit. And just looking at the university's resources for EV charging stations and all of their parking facilities, they have a grand total of 14 EV charging spaces. And I think it's proper for Councilmember Hayner to raise this as an issue that they need to do more to augment the infrastructure for EV charging stations in their facilities. This doesn't necessarily do it, but as we look at other situations, particularly surface parking lots where there's opportunity to also develop solar in conjunction with EV charging stations, I think we need to pursue some of that language in some of those agreements.
Discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner on the amendment.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
No.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Lum?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson? No. Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Remlauer?
No.
Motion fails.
Further discussion of the main motion? Councilmember Hayner?
I'd just like to say, you talk about getting ahead of the curve on negotiating these things, that I was not aware that this lease was even up for renegotiation until it showed up at PAC. And so, it's on the agenda, we don't get to vote on it as liaisons, we're ex officio on PAC. So, to my colleague on PAC's concerns that, why didn't I bring this up at the meeting, is sometimes you don't think about things until you're thinking about them. And you go home from the meeting and you think, what's a good resolution? How can I say, rent out our parks for 18 cars, where can I come in the middle of that, And so that's where my attempted modifications came from. So I have a hard time supporting this. I know the park needs the money, but I hope he's going to say yes to it, but it's not the right thing. It's like we're pimping our parks out, really. I mean, it's got to be frank, you know. I don't like it. I don't think we're getting enough for it, and I don't think especially now, I don't think it's an appropriate use.
Councilor Smith and Rumlow. Oh, my apologies.
Thank
Councilor.
you. You know, I had written down on my notes to talk about the main motion with the electric charging stations, and that was definitely an issue that I had with this. This agreement didn't address that. And I thought that should be, again, embedded in all our negotiations going forward. And perhaps we're a little late embedding it in this one. Furthermore, I think we've woefully undersold ourselves financially. I appreciate Councilmember Lum's questions every meeting. If she ever leaves council, I hope she just sends questions in. You know, the staff's response said this is 33% of the week, and you know, I'm doing the math here, and to be honest with you, there's no charge for parking on Sundays. Park is closed from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So we're not just giving these spaces out for 33% of the day. In fact, it's well over 50% of the time if you really look at the economic sense and the use of these spaces. So unfortunately, I know the university is a very important partner with the city, and the city with them. I cannot support this amendment, or this lease, that is. I cannot support it at this dollar figure, with the university charging close to $1,900 for a permit, and giving the city a fraction of it. I find it a bad business deal. Therefore, I can't support this lease with these financial terms.
Further discussion? Councilmember Grand.
I just want to thank park staff for the thorough job that you did working with the university and explaining how you came up with these numbers. This is a small lease relative to some of the larger leases that we have. And I think we are definitely getting ahead of the numbers on that one. You know, it's an asset that we already have. It's a way to leverage some money. I really do take offense at the notice. I'm not even going to repeat what Councilmember Hayner said about what we're doing to our parks. I think that's problematic to say, to use that to characterize staff's efforts for what really has been like from my perspective, a creative use of an asset that we already have, and a way to be good partners and bring some revenue into a system. I think it also probably captures a way that if we didn't have this agreement, that there might be employees parking there anyway. So it is a way to actually capture that revenue and have some stronger regulations and have an understanding and communications with those employees between the parks and the university about when employees can be parking there and when they need to leave. And I think these relationships have been really helpful in ensuring that those spaces are open for our parks users when there's the greatest need. So I'm really appreciative of staff's efforts. This was vetted by the Park Advisory Commission, and like Councilmember Eaton said, I enjoyed that conversation that we had last week. I thought it was really thorough, and park staff have a really great presentation if anyone's interested in seeing what we're thinking about for Fuller Park coming up.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lum?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the comments just made by Councilmembers Ramlawi and Grand. And we'll also note, that staff in their response, thank you very much, shared that, provided the rationale for these rates, which I agree are reasonable, and it was based on what the U of M gold permit is, cost per year, and it was divided by a third because they're going to be using this a third of the time, essentially. So this charge of $739 per space for year one, or a little over $13,000, sorry, a year total, with a 3% built-in increase for year two, I think is a good arrangement. And so, again, in a reasonable rate to charge, and it's nice to see that this revenue accrues to the Parks and Rec General Fund. So, yeah, I appreciate your work on this as well, and I will be supporting it. Thanks.
I, too, am going to be supporting the resolution. The city and the University of Michigan work closely and well together on a wide variety of matters. This is an instance in which we can help them with some of our, with their parking needs in an important area of the community, and we can obtain a measure of revenue for our parks at a little outlay to a little cost to ourselves. It is a win-win. It's what, this is an example, I think, of what partners do with each other, and I'm pleased to support it. Councilmember Ramlawi.
Thank you. Again, I won't be supporting this. I believe it's a bad business deal. I appreciate the work that's been put into it by staff to get us to this point. I would just say, I ask my colleagues to join me in asking staff to go back and renegotiate a better deal to get us more money for our parks. As we know, they're underfunded, so every dollar matters. We are inducing parking here, inducing transportation, inducing cars coming into this part of the city it's got a lot of traffic to begin with. So I just think we're inconsistent with the message and the policy that we're setting. Again, we declared a climate emergency, but we're not following up with the incremental organic measures that need to take place in order to achieve those goals. I appreciate, again, the thought and the spirit, but there is, this is something I believe can be fixed with renegotiating, going back and negotiating with our partners to get it right, come back with us, maybe a couple charging stations in lieu of the additional, financial outlay, something more than is currently being offered. I think we're underselling ourselves in this case on many levels, and I don't think it's too much to go back and ask for a better deal, something that's more mutually beneficial.
Let me suggest that we're done on this, but if there's people that want more to say, Councilmember Bannister, then Hayner.
Yes, I appreciate the comments of Councilmember Ramlawi and Hayner, and I do think U of M needs to be more, or I would like to see them encouraged by city staff and city council to move more quickly on encouraging their employees to park and ride and zip into town on possibly an electric bus, and also build more workforce housing on their 2,000 acres of land here. So one thing that was discussed last night at caucus was the whereas clause, where this was for a 2-year lease agreement with an option to renew for another successive 2-year term, taking us through 2024. There were some encouraging words at caucus last night that we could make an amendment to bring that down to 1 year, a 1-year lease for today. And so, and then revisit it again more quickly. So I would like to make that amendment to the whereas clause that the term of the agreement shall be 1 year,
1 2-year term or 1 year?
a 1-year term.
Second by Councilmember Ramlawi. Councilmember Bannister, you still have the floor.
That was for all of the reasons previously mentioned. That's where this amendment is coming from.
Councilmember Nelson.
I think I need an answer from Mr. Postma about how that would work, because the lease as it's presented is 2 years with 2 with sort of increasing rates on the second year, so,
We've already adopted a longer period of time, but you're asking on the renewal to have it for 1 year. We haven't gone into the next year, so the 1 year period is, I believe, for the next fiscal year?
Whatever the contract terms are. I mean, this is a bilateral agreement. Any changes we make, we have to go back to you and have to have them agree to them as well. If it's the pleasure of council to have 1 year with the proviso that we look at alternatives for the following year, certainly within the, the authority of the council to do that.
Yes.
I only offer that negotiating these leases takes a lot of time from staff, and maybe the better answer is, to encourage us to go talk to you about
Right,
looking at parking as a whole.
You'd have to go back to them.
Further discussion? Councilmember Nelson, I think you still have the floor. So I guess altering a whereas clause does not alter the underlying. If it's council's desire to have this particular lease be renegotiated, let me, I guess, suggest that we postpone it, that there be a motion to postpone, which I would vote against, but if that's the desire, the method, I think, that makes sense is to have there be a motion to postpone, which then gets voted on. During the course of that postponement, we'd have staff talk to the university about altering the term consistent with the yes votes, and we'd move forward on that basis. So in that light, can I ask for this amendment to the whereas clause be withdrawn?
Yes.
Thank you. Does anybody have objection to that? So now we have discussion on the main motion. I guess, Councilmember Bannister, you still have the floor.
Okay, well, I would like to offer then that we postpone this resolution and go back to the drawing board to incorporate some of the discussion we've had tonight, including a one-year term and some of the other language about electric vehicles and park and ride and a higher piece of the rent coming to the city.
How long is necessary to have these conversations?
I would assume at least a couple months, and working with them during that time, at least a month to 2 months, if not longer. Sorry, I don't do the normal of it, so.
All right. So this is the first meeting, you want to say the second meeting in April?
Expires, and the March 31st is when the current lease.
I think it's reasonable to ask us to come back with either a revised contract or an update by the second meeting in March.
Okay, yep.
And that way we can tell you where we are.
So is that all right, Councilmember Bannister, second meeting in March? That is the postponement. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Amlawi. Discussion of the postponement. Councilmember Bannister, you still have the floor. Then we're going to have a queue on this, and let's move this one quickly,
I'm all
please.
set.
Councilmember Lum.
So this is a 2-year lease agreement for 18 parking spaces. We're postponing this, we're proposing, yeah, it's like mind-blowing, I'm sorry, it really is. We're talking about 18 parking spaces, 13,000 to the Parks Plus, for the Parks Department. Year one, it's real money, and it grows by 3%. So postponing it until when?
Second meeting in March.
And that'll get the job done? We'll see.
If I can speak, if we could potentially do, if you're looking at some way to make an amendment, if you could do the 2 years without the secondary renewal, that way we would be in that contract, and then as we work with U of M.
But why? You've got,
Okay.
if I can ask, just know you have 3% built in for year two.
Right, I believe keeping
why
the
would we
the
leave
first
money on
2-year
that?
agreement, because it's a
Why
2-year
would we
agreement.
walk away from that?
And then with the renewal. So that would be, if there's anything, if we can get the 2-year agreement, that would be great. But I think staff will do what council would like.
I got Councilmember Griswold, Hayner. Councilmember Griswold. On the postponement,
I
let's keep
think-
it quick, please.
I think that what's being proposed by staff is a good compromise. And I also have one question for staff. The Fuller Road parking, are those 1-year or 2-year contracts?
Historically, it's been a one-year lease with an option to renew administratively. So that is what the last 8 years have been. It's been 1-year lease with a renewal.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
I just want to say that I agree with your effort at compromise, sir, that I think voting on a 2-year lease is appropriate, I mean, whether I support it or not, without the administrative clause to renew it, because then at least we have set ourselves in the future a 2-year conversation to be had again, and they've had 2 years to think about the things that we need for those spaces. It's not really, if you live in this neighborhood that I represent, it's not really like a partnership, because in a month, they're going to have 1,480 spaces operating between those two structures, and another 18 is like in the ocean. And so, that's not counting the 250 that are at Fuller Court, right, or Fuller Park, rather. So I would just, I would suggest that we don't delay this, and that we vote up or down on a 2-year plan. I mean, it's not mine to modify, but I already said my thing about it.
Further discussion of the postponement?
I appreciate your offer.
Further discussion of the postponement?
I would like to withdraw my postponement for the other amendment as discussed by Councilmember Griswold and Hayner.
We can't amend the contract on the floor. All we can do is postpone it. Further discussion of the postponement? Councilmember Nelson.
I'm sorry, I think Councilmember Bannister is trying to withdraw her postponement. She cannot withdraw her postponement and offer another amendment? Is that what you just told her?
I thought, because it's a negotiated contract, we can't amend the contract. We can have it postponed.
Okay.
And then with instruction to alter
Okay.
it. But we
Okay.
don't have the authority to amend the underlying contract effectively.
I follow what you're saying. It's the framing of her amendment, I guess, is what, yeah, okay.
Councilor Bannister?
So are you saying, are we saying that we can postpone it and take out this renewal for another 2-year term? Because it seems like there's agreement that we would go with the existing lease as suggested by staff for 2 years. We just would like to remove the second half of that whereas clause about having an automatic renewal for another 2 years.
I believe staff is going to take that as its instruction as it goes back to renegotiate the contract with the university in the event that the postponement passes. Am I correct? Yes. Roll call vote, please, on the postponement, starting with, unless someone has something to say. Councilmember Hayner.
Does the clerk call it, or you, Mr. Mayor?
I don't call it.
Just wait for Jackie.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, I said, roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember
Oh,
Hayner.
okay, thank you.
No, my apologies.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Long?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Further discussion of the main motion? Roll call vote, please, on the main motion, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Long?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson? Yes. Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi?
No.
Motion carries.
CA9, resolution to restate the purpose and membership of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of CA9. Councilmember Hayner.
Just briefly, this is similar to the Environmental Commission, where we want to add youth members to Energy Commission, which I fully support. However, I'm not certain if this is lined correctly in the agenda, but it says 14 to 25 is the definition of a youth member. I know we had this go around at the last meeting about, is 14 too young, should it be 16? Is 25 too old for youth? So I just wanted to bring that out and make my comments that I think 14 is too young, I think 25 is too old. I don't know what the numbers are to amend it, perhaps my colleague, Councilmember Eaton, would have a number for that, but if he's satisfied with 14, I think 14 is too young. It's just my personal experience with my 14-year-olds.
Further discussion? Councilor Eaton.
It's been a while since my kids were 14, but I tend to agree, and so I would move to amend this in paragraph 1B, where it currently says the ages of 14 and 25, and change that to 16 and 25.
Seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Is that friendly to the body?
Yes.
Not friendly? Councilor Eaton, you still have the floor.
We had this discussion a couple weeks ago on the other commission. It passed. I'm not going to flog this horse. I'm sorry.
Further discussion? Councilor Grant.
I won't flog it either, but I do want to say, I do have a 14-year-old at home, and get exposed to a lot of 14-year-olds and through movements related to climate action in the city have encountered a lot of 14 and 15-year-olds who know a lot more about these issues than most adults that I run into. So I think their application should be able to stand on their own merits. I understand this is going down, but just having a lot of personal experience with young people that age, I feel like if they want to come out and contribute to their community, and I hope that we will make efforts on other commissions to include youth members as well. I hope these aren't the first, the last two where we make this change, because I think it's really encouraging to try to encourage young people to get involved in their boards and commissions and start participating in civic life early. So I'll be voting no, understanding that.
Further discussion?
16-year-olds are
I'm
great
sorry.
also.
My apologies, Councilmember Grant. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner. Thank you. This is on the amendment from 14 to 16.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Long?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We now come to I'm sorry. Further discussion, the main motion is amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. We now come to a set of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about a specific item on the agenda, that is to say, the specific subject of the public hearing. You need not have signed up in advance, but your speech must relate to the subject matter of the public hearing. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend section 1237 of chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, resolution to approve the Hosford annexation, 3.56 acres, 2260 Traver Road. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. A1, work session of January 13 and regular session meeting minutes of January 21, 2020. May I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes? Moved by Councilmember Ramlawi, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. B1, an ordinance to amend section 1237 of chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion, please, of B1.
Well done.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. C1, ordinance to authorize, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of water supply system revenue bonds, Series 2020, to the Michigan Finance Authority. Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Ramlawi. Discussion, please, of C1. Councilmember Hayner.
Well, I want to thank Mr. Crawford and the folks at Water for putting this together. I was surprised, and maybe some of you were too, to see the amount of rolling bonds that we have out there. And it's a, you know, it's a lot. It's an ongoing process. And so it was just, you know, it was just sort of it shows the long-term commitment that we have to our water system here in the city. And I just, people aren't drinking dirty water, they're not gonna drink dirty water. We're doing the best we can here, and this is a big part of that. Unfortunately, it's a big investment, but it's really at the core of what we're here for. So I encourage you to support this bond issuance.
Further discussion? Councilmember Lum.
You know, just say, the bonds are, of course, secured by the revenues paid for by the utility payers and the water supply system. These are not general obligation bonds of the city, and I appreciate the feedback about the rates that by issuing, and this is the 7th time we've issued them through the Drinking Water Revolving Fund, and they're sold to the Michigan Finance Authority through the, this program, and that the rates are lower, and the financial advisors indicated that the rates could be 0.5% lower than if the city issued the water revenue bond. So, well done, Finance Department.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes?
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Affirmative.
Councilmember Lamawi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
DC 1 being shifted, we come to DC 2, resolution to appoint Eric Ellis to the Greenbelt Advisory Commission, moved by Councilmember Grant, seconded by Councilmember Lum.
Missed one.
I did indeed. My earnest apologies. C2, an ordinance to amend section 1171 of Chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Nelson, seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion, please, of C2. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is as an amendment to Chapter 8, Organization of Boards and Commissions. This is just sort of creating a standard procedure for how applicants to boards and commissions are considered, at least in cases where a board or commission has a council liaison. And I got the idea for this from my work on the Commission on Disabilities Issues, because we have, on that body, we have a designated commissioner who is in charge of recruitment and membership. And he had previously, for the last year, he's coordinated, since I've been on the commission, for the last year, he's coordinated with the mayor's office around applicants and filling openings. And we just decided on our commission that it actually would be a lot more efficient if our membership person coordinated with me, because I, as a council member, I have access to the database of applications. So I looked at some bylaws for other boards and commissions and their different procedures for how applicants are considered. And it occurred to me that it would probably be a really good improvement to the process if every board and commission, with the benefit of a council liaison who has access to this database, coordinated with another commissioner and basically had a regular review of applicants. So there could be a conversation about, from people sitting on the body, what skills and experiences do we need to contribute to our work. And so I hope this isn't terribly controversial. It does not diminish in any way the authority of anyone procedurally to choose whoever they want as a nominee, and I'm speaking of the mayor, of course. The mayor can choose whoever he would like to nominate to positions. However, this sort of adds an extra conversation where board members and council liaisons to boards could make recommendations to the mayor and say, you know, these are some applicants that we think you should give an extra look to. So that's my summary, and I hope you'll support my amendment. Thank you.
Councilmember Ramai.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague who brought this forth in order to have more best practices used as we try to govern. In this case, this is a first reading, so I will support it. But I'm just curious as to how much influence the member of the council is going to have on who is on these boards and commissions. I appreciate knowing who's coming in and who's leaving, and who the applicants are, and I know that we have access to it. But there are so many boards and commissions, and time flies, so it's something that it's good to have a group designated to help with that. And we'll talk more offline between now and the next meeting about how this will help address it, but yeah, I just want these boards and commissions to operate in a way that doesn't have undue influence. And I understand there's going to be a rub there, and it's obvious in some boards and commissions that it exists today between policymakers and people on boards and commissions who want to shape policy as well. So I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Eaton.
I'd like to be added as co-sponsor for this. Thank you.
Councilor Hayner.
Thanks. A question and a comment. Question is, in the addition of 1B, it says the group designated under section named shall submit recommendations for appointments. So shall, like they are, like that's how every board and commission that has a pair of, or a council liaison is going to create this small group to review these, and then must, shall or must, right? I mean, that's what shalls means. So that's my question, is that what that means there? So Ann and Chip are on EC, or on an environmental commission, and so they're gonna get their group together from EC and make these, or Julie and I, or whoever, shall submit. Is that what we want? So that's my question. And then my comment is, that I think it is a good idea to get a formal process in there, and I think this does have the potential to benefit the boards and also the selection process, and get more people looking at who those names are, and perhaps assist the mayor in choosing. But it also has the potential to create I don't know what the right word is, this isn't going to sound right maybe, but a sort of a system where there's undue authority given to council liaisons, to commissions, to make the recommendations that create a kind of an inbred system. That's, inbred isn't the right word, but a system where there might be too much authority given over the selection. I mean, I know it only rests with the mayor now, but it's just I'm concerned. I just have general concerns about it. Vague concerns.
Councilmember Grant. I'm sorry, Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you.
My apologies. Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate where this is coming from. I really do like the Granicus system and think that it was, an excellent idea to have more access to those applications. And but I can't support this as it is, because I do feel like it's overly rigid in terms of designating how the process goes. In various commissions that I've sat on, and having sat on a commission, I think the process can vary. For example, when I appoint members to the Greenbelt, we involve leadership, myself, and the staff liaison, and there's no mention of the staff person that helps in terms of looking at candidates, because I think sometimes they have a great understanding of what the needs are. So I do like the idea of having a process. I also am concerned about if the mayor were to go forward with another member that wasn't recommended, that would cause just unnecessary conflict and toxicity into the process, that if the mayor decided to go against that recommendation, that we're just dragging potentially, again, people's names who are trying to volunteer through the mud publicly at this table, and I'd like to avoid that. So I do like the idea of having a process. We have access to this data. There's no reason why we can't share it with the designated person on a commission or leadership of that commission. But I don't like the step of making this so formalized that it has to be the same way, because I think commissions operate differently, and I'm just a little nervous about dictating this process to a commission.
Further discussion? Councilmember Griswold?
I'd like to be listed as a co-sponsor. This is first reading. I think there's some opportunities possibly for improvement. I think that formalizing processes while still providing some agility is a good idea, and so I don't know what the balance is there, but I hope that Councilmember Nelson will look at that. Thank you.
Councilor Hayner?
Well, I wonder if some of these concerns could, now and giving it a moment's thought, could be alleviated by modifying paragraph A to add this in there, and/or staff liaison, and modifying paragraph B to say may submit. Just my open-ended suggestions. That we could say, I agree with what Councilmember Grand said, that sometimes the staff liaisons are in a great position to really say, hey, here's the need that we have. Like, really keep your eyes open for this kind of person. Let's sit down and review these for a person that, fits this bill. I agree that staff sometimes has a really good idea. These liaisons have been very helpful. I know that it has been with the Center City Task Force. She's been terrific. And so I don't know if I should, as not a sponsor of this, but that's my suggestion, that we modify it in that way.
Councilor Nelson?
So your suggestion is to add a clause in A, and/or city staff members?
Well, it's where it says, and one or more voting members of the board or commission and/or the staff liaison to the board.
Staff liaison.
Well, I'm not sure.
Because I would be open to that. I'm real, so a couple of things. I guess my appointments are somewhat unconventional. I have, the most conventional appointment I have as a council liaison is the Commission on Disabilities. And as it's functioning now, it's actually pretty straightforward for Larry and I to meet just once a month and sit down. And like, if anybody else would want to participate in that conversation about like what applications are out there floating. So I don't, the challenge of logistics, maybe it's that I don't have the kind of conventional appointments that others have in environmental or energy or ones with lots of volunteers. Anyway, I guess I'm also like really intrigued by the idea that it is more problematic to include more people, and a few of us are more comfortable having this all rest in the hands of one person. Because I always feel better about a decision that includes a couple more heads rather than just one. So, and I guess my other idea was that truly the people who are in the best position to know what's needed on a board or commission are the people who are sitting on it. But I would take as a friendly amendment, adding the phrase and/or staff liaisons or staff members, if anybody has a proposed phrasing for that, because I appreciate that staff is supporting these boards and commissions, and they also are in a position to know. I would, for the B, perhaps we could say may instead of shall. Again, this is where I'm looking to my own personal experience on the Disability Commission. It's not burdensome for us to look through a list of applicants, and when I look through the Granicus database, it doesn't look to me like there are hundreds of applications that are this unwieldy task for a couple people to sift through. But I guess I'm listening to other suggestions from others.
Following up on that, I think I have some language which might fit the two interests. In A, when one or more council members are appointed as members of liaisons to a board and commission, the board or commission shall designate a group consisting of relevant staff, the council, the city council members, and one or more members. Is that acceptable? Is that so? That's moved by Ackerman, second by Nelson. Is that friendly to the body?
No.
All right, so let's hold off on that, if I may.
Oh,
Yeah, we're gonna do one at a time.
Oh.
Hi, well, okay.
Explain myself.
One at a time.
And it's already been moved and seconded. It has already been, I was gonna, exactly. Okay, thank you. You're right. Councilor Lum, the new language is adding relevant staff, and it has been moved and seconded, and there is an objection to it, so it was not friendly, and so let's roll with that amendment. Councilor Lum,
If I could speak to the amendment?
please.
So my concern here, and thank you, Councilmember Nelson, for presenting these recommendations. And generally think they're fine. And I can see how, from your experience on the Disability Committee, you're being involved with recommendations and being aware of applicants to that Board or Commission, and then passing along those recommendations has been very helpful with some other boards and commissions as well. I know the way the Police Commission is set up, we have that opportunity now, set up formally, it's established in the ordinance to provide that guidance. My concern and why I said I object to amending it in a friendly manner, resides with all due respect to staff. Just historically, appointments to boards and commissions, it's been governed by our city charter, and the mayor, is the greater among us, has always had this authority. It's established in the charter as well. And I do not think it's appropriate to we can always seek the advice of staff members, but when it comes to making appointments, I do not think that that should be something that is where a staff person, again, with all due respect to our staff, where a staff person is given that authority. I do think that should continue to reside with the elected officials. Again, we can be advised by staff, but I do not think that they, should be having this much authority on appointments to our boards and commissions. I really think it should be more of a citizen-driven, elected official-driven kind of recommendation, if you will, the way it always has been. And so I am not comfortable incorporating, including the precise language again, Mr. Mayor, was?
Consisting of relevant staff, comma, the city council members, comma, and one or more.
Yeah, it's the relevant staff. It's giving this authority to our staff. Again, I say that respectfully.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Lum, for that. Made me redo my mental math in consideration of this, but I think I will still support it. I think we as people all have blind spots. I think we as groups of people have even more blind spots, and if staff's role is to be objective and expert in the room, I think they can be a really valuable voice in pointing out what deficits or expertise the commission or the board may have, and I think that could be really valuable. I think too, while the language doesn't specify this, it would be my expectation that it'd be, one member of staff, a minority of the group would be staff, that their voice wouldn't overwhelm this process. And I think with that, I'd be comforted to know that they'd be a voice in the room, but not the largest voice in the room.
Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yeah, I appreciate Councilmember Lum's thoughts on this, deep thoughts regarding our boards and commissions and how this should reside with elected members, with a political body rather than staff, with all due respect to staff. I mean, this is the one part where our community can interject their political will and challenge the institutional way of doing business. And so, I pause. When you start making that, it becomes a seismic fundamental shift in how you compose these boards and commissions would ultimately shape policy. So I do think you're mixing oil and water in some respects.
Councilor Hayner, then perhaps we can.
Yeah, I know I was the one who brought it up, but I'm finding myself agreeing with what council members Lum and Ramwali have said that. And I don't know if this is a question for our attorney, but is there anything in the charter that precludes this kind of conversation we're even having right now? You would speak up, I assume.
I'll look further. Offhand, I do not see anything on that. Ultimately, the charter does give the appointment authority specifically to the mayor. But this ordinance, as we've advised Councilmember Nelson, there is not a charter problem with with giving this direction.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that, and Councilwoman Lum speaks from the experience and as Mayor Pro Tem, and I just, yeah, I think she's right. I think this is a process that is reserved for the political body. It might be a little bit, just another thing that we're laying on staff for, maybe. I mean, yeah, I spoke highly of our staff, and I don't take that back, but I think I'm not going to support this amendment. I think my colleagues are right on this one, that this is not the way to go. It's a people's process. It's people's process. Not that staff aren't people. Just like not that council members aren't members of the public. Council members are members of the public.
For whatever it's worth, I'm going to support the amendment. I think this is an advisory, this ordinance seeks to affect an advisory committee. Staff performs advisory functions all the time. They have valuable information and expertise with respect to the various boards and commissions. Further, I would expect I would expect staff not to dominate those conversations. It's my firm belief that they would participate, provide advice to the council member and the relevant members of the boards and commissions, and then move forward. Finally, even if this doesn't pass, I guess I'd expect the chair and the council member to consult with the staff member, because the staff member knows a thing or two about the commission and the subject matter related. Councilor Lum?
I would just say, this would be a leap. I think, because I think it's a bit of a leap to open this up to having council members who in fact, even make these kinds of recommendations, but I think this is a good, will lead to, engaging people in a positive way and productive way. But it's, why do I say it's a bit of a leap? Because, as we know, again, in the charter, if you look at the duties of the mayor, the mayor, in the description under Chapter 4 of the Charter says the mayor appoints all council committees, is a member thereof, and makes other appointments as provided in the charter or by the council. And again, the authority is always, at the end of the day, resided with the mayor. And again, he's the greater among us. Whoever sits in that seat is. So that goes along with that job description, and rightfully so, in my view. This would be a dramatic, or as Councilmember Ramlawi said, seismic shift in, even though this person, whoever, is in the room when these recommendations are made on the staff side, whether or not they're in the minority, it still is, again, I think it would be always helpful to seek that input. However, to have the staff person, as this now reads, actually make recommendations on who should be appointed to a board and commission is really a seismic change. And so I will not be supporting it.
Councilor Eaton, then perhaps we can move forward on the amendment.
So I've found the arguments of Councilmember Lum and Ramali persuasive, and I'll be voting against this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Bannister?
No.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Lum?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi?
No.
Motion fails.
The second, I guess, contemplated, or at least suggested amendment was to change shall to may. Moved by Councilor Ackerman, seconded by Councilor Eaton. Is that friendly to the body?
Yes.
Councilor Ramlawi?
I appreciate the acrimony on this, but I just think this really takes a lot of teeth out of it, and it just becomes mute at this point. Shall is pretty directive, may is very optional, and I just think it really, just that's something to think of.
Councilor Hayner?
It does seem slightly out of sync with we're saying form this board, but you don't have to do anything with it. And so maybe they should both be may or both be shall. I don't know. I wonder if our chief is, well, I don't know. I don't know. I just think that, as you said, Councilman Ramwali, it's shall form the board, may say something to the mayor about your results. It doesn't quite jive, even though I suggested it.
I've got Ackerman, Grand, and Nelson on the queue.
Did you want to respond to something?
Yeah, I kind of did. I mean, I'm trying to be agreeable on this because I really am open to compromise usually, but truly, like, the whole reason that I brought this forward was that I was looking at bylaws of different commissions and seeing such variation that I did see the value in having this be the process in every case. And so the truth is that shall does make a lot more sense in terms of the intent behind why I brought this forward. So yeah, it doesn't make sense for people to get together and look at applications and not actually do anything with it. So I wouldn't support changing it to may.
Further discussion? We're voting on shall to may. I'm going to vote in favor, for my part, I'm going to vote in favor of may. I like as much, my predecessors, and I assume my successors, really do value all the input that we get. It's a big city, and we don't, we, meaning myself, my predecessors, successors, do not know everybody, nor do we know what the exigencies of all the various boards and commissions are. At the same time, I don't know that I want to have it be a violation of law to fail to provide a recommendation. So that's why I'm recommending, that's why I am going to vote in favor of may, but also vote in favor of the thing as a whole. Further discussion, Councilmember Grant.
Just like to point out that some of these appointments are time sensitive, and there are actually restrictions in the bylaws about getting people reappointed within a certain timeline, or boards and commissions can be left without enough members to have a quorum and function effectively. That can be a particular challenge around times of like summertime, for example. So I could also see this being, if it was shall, and having that process slow things down. I just wanted to mention that because I think that's another complication or unintended consequence that wasn't brought up.
Further discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Lum?
This is shall to may.
No.
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Ramlawi?
No.
Motion carries.
Further discussion, the main motion is amended. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just wanted to say thank you to the author and the now sponsors. I think this is a good framework to put in place that should boards and commissions want to be involved with the nomination process, they know how to, and that's fantastic, so thank you.
I'll say that I will certainly be supporting this. Many, as has been observed, many boards and commissions follow a process similar to this. Either the chair, communicating out directly to me, or other folks in the commission communicating to me. As indicated, the person serving as mayor knows only a subset of folks throughout the community, and certainly doesn't know the needs of all the various boards and commissions, and so it's highly useful to receive input from a wide variety of sources. And to the extent that this gives boards and commissions the incentive to encourage that reflection upon membership and the provision of input, it's all to the good. Further discussion, Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for articulating that, and I want to agree. I think this is another in a decent line of efforts to open up the business of the city and the city council to more residents, and more along with these other sunshine laws and other things we've been looking at. And I want to thank Councilwoman Nelson for bringing this forward. I think it's I think on the whole it's a nice idea.
Further discussion? I will say too, just by one final point by way of experience, it was expressed that there might be some concern with the recommendations or requests from a set of boards and commissions not receiving, whoever is serving as mayor declining the recommendation. That certainly happens. The recommendations are also followed. I think a lot depends on the manner in which that's done. The person serving as mayor, I think, needs to acknowledge input from the board and commission, needs to honor it by reflection, and further needs to honor it by, if an alternate decision is made, by articulating the reasons to the people providing the recommendations, as is typically the chair. Councilor Nelson, Lum.
Thanks. I'm just assuming that, however this proceeds now with, this proposal going forward, that there will always be the understood flexibility that it's the mayor's ultimate call. And again, that's determined by our charter. And whoever the mayor is, that ability, that authority should be preserved unless we change the charter. And then we go to the voters to change our charter, if that's what we want to do. But the mayor, it's, you have that authority, that ability, and whether it's you, and as you said, for your predecessors and successors, I would expect the same and want the same.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Renlawi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
DC2, resolution to appoint Eric Ellis to the Greenbelt, did I do this right? Yes, I did. To the Greenbelt Advisory Commission. Moved by Councilmember Grant, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of DC2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. DC3, resolution to establish City Council Mobility Committee. Moved by Councilmember Griswold, seconded by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion, please, of DC3. Councilmember Griswold.
I've been working with staff on this, and they have requested that I move to postpone this until the next meeting.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Ackerman. Councilmember Griswold, you still have the floor if you wish it.
Yes, I would like to read the memorandum that was added to this resolution and also provide some background. This resolution was originally written almost a year ago. And I think that I considered it from my perspective as an elected official, but I did not consider it from the perspective of other people in the community and on boards and commissions, and for that I apologize. The fact that members of the community have come out and spoken about mobility, I think further is evidence that mobility is a very important issue in this community at this time. It was my intent to formalize some of the policy-making activities that council members are engaged in right now that are not recorded and in some cases are not formally communicated to staff members. And so this would be an opportunity to do it. This is real short. The primary purpose of the Council Mobility Committee is to formalize and strengthen existing activities and relationships of council and other entities external to the Ann Arbor City government. The Transportation Commission will continue per its charter. The council liaison to the Transportation Commission would serve on the Council Mobility Committee to foster improved communications. The Council Mobility Committee will allow for a better understanding of the interrelationships and dependencies between the council goals of affordability, sustainability, equity, Vision Zero, etc. And so I want to make sure that we get it right and that we consider all of the perspectives on how this would be done. I serve on the Transportation Commission, and I see their work as being with staff and with policies sort of internal to the city of Ann Arbor. I do not see Transportation Commission members advocate in Lansing or serving on SEMCOG task forces, expediting tickets with DTE when that needs to be done in support of staff. And so these are really totally separate functions, and I am willing to continue to flush out those differences and make sure they're documented well. Thank you.
Further discussion of the postponement. Councilmember Ramlawi.
I appreciate Councilwoman Griswold for bringing this forth. I would just suggest to include the University of Michigan in the fourth resolve clause when this comes back as one of
Thank
the
you.
partners in the area. Mobility has become a big issue as we try to tackle all the things, whether it's affordable housing or climate action, quality of life issues, and seems to have caused a lot of consternation and frustration with policymaking. I don't think this is an attempt, at least I don't vote and support it if it's an attempt to try to do something in a way of negating the folks that serve on the Transportation Commission from doing what they're currently doing. But I think this perhaps would help us address our larger challenges and the cross-pollination that occurs in those conversations when we have with other actors in the region. Mobility isn't just in our sphere of influence here in terms of the voters, but beyond the border as well. So I look forward to seeing where this goes and hearing the advice and concerns of staff and council members.
Further discussion of the postponement. Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the postponement. I do support the gist of this, and I don't want it to get lost, but I do think that there are potential issues of overlap with the Transportation Commission and specific roles and responsibilities of this committee that need to be worked through. I have some concerns about how this would all work and the possible extra staff workload that would take. And then I'm also concerned that creating this committee undermines the roles of individual council members in terms of community engagement on specific ward issues. The reference to, in the resolve clause, the Council Mobility Committee that would, it sounds like, take the lead on community engagement. And as we know, mobility issues that crop up in our wards and our neighborhoods are really end of the curb, if there ever was one, issues, and has a huge impact on our constituents. And each council member in each ward needs to have, to take the lead on representing those concerns to their council colleagues and the mayor. And it would not be helpful and not a positive if we're creating some committee to take that lead role in, because these are, let's face it, these boil down, these are specific ward issues. And so it's those council members who need to be engaged. And I know when it comes to the university, we've had, mobility issues crop up, and we've had some recently in the second ward and over the years, and with every ward. And the university, it's been my experience, has actually done a good job of reaching out to the specific areas and neighbors who are impacted, and the neighbors are very engaged, and it's up to us to help facilitate that kind of engagement and again, and represent our neighbors' concerns to the university and be present in all of those discussions. So that's one of my big concerns, that this should never undermine that role that very important role that we all have and need to, be an advocate and representative of and for. But for now, I will certainly support the postponement. Thanks.
Councilmember Graham, then Smith.
I reluctantly will likely support postponement, but I really struggle to see how I could support this just a couple weeks from now, unless it was, I don't know, ripped apart and like totally different words were in front of me. There's so much redundancy here in terms of the Transportation Commission. We heard from the chair. I know not speaking for the entire commission, but I think her points were well taken. We don't have I think there's also redundancies with the policy committee, if this is really an issue about policy. There's nothing that says that 5 council members who are interested in issues can't bring forward resolutions to council related to mobility, so I don't know why they wouldn't just do that, why we need a separate committee. I'm really concerned about the 3rd resolve clause, and the 4th resolve clause, that this group would somehow speak for the entire body on issues of mobility. I find that highly problematic as opposed to council voting as a whole to advocate for policy. And we don't have other committees for issues that are important to us. We don't have a council climate action committee. We don't have a council affordability, affordable housing committee. Because we have other boards and commissions that do those things, and then when the issues are really important, we come together as a body and we work on them. So I feel like this is a really slippery slope, and I know many of us belong to it already. We're liaisons to many, many boards and commissions, so I would personally rather see that energy be used on specific initiatives related to mobility, as opposed to just creating something that I see as completely redundant.
Councilmember Smith.
Are we speaking in the postponement?
People are doing what they're doing.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith.
Let's just go ahead and get to the postponement.
Councilmember
Because I'm not
Griswold.
going to support either, so.
Councilmember Griswold.
I have listened to the comments and will consider them. I think there's opportunities for improvement, and that's all I'll say. I forgot my train of thought with the humor in the audience.
Further discussion of the postponement. I will just say basically I have very substantial concerns with respect to the resolution and the proposal, but I'll communicate those offline.
May I make my statement that I've recovered from now?
Yes, of course.
One option would be to actually roll some of these responsibilities into the policy committee, because they really are policy issues. But that, I'll give some thought and work with the city administrator on to see if that would reduce the staff commitment and may streamline this process while still getting accomplished what we need to.
Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner on the postponement.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Long?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Romlawi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Let's take a short break. short break. DC 4, resolution for city council communications, moved by Councilmember Griswold, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of DC 4. Councilmember Griswold.
I move to postpone this until the next meeting, and given the other important issues we have before us tonight, I'd prefer that we discuss this in committees rather than tonight. However, I'm willing to listen to any of my council members' comments.
Postpone to the next meeting, you say?
Yes.
Seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is postponed. DC 5, resolution to recommend approval of issuance of a downtown development liquor license to Jagged Fork 3 LLC, moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion, please, of DC 5.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Lum.
This item is coming from the Liquor License Review Committee, and thank you all for meeting on Friday, and thank you, Ms. Boudry, for getting this on this agenda. It's to recommend the state approve a downtown development district license at 415 South Main for Jagged Fork LLC. State legislation about 15 years ago established these types of liquor licenses, and the applicant meets all of the established criteria, including demonstrating an investment in excess of $75,000 in the property. City staff do not have any objections. All fees and taxes are paid, and the Liquor License Review Committee recommends your approval of the resolution. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry. Did I miss? My apologies. Councilmember Nelson.
I just had a quick question, which I asked Kathy at caucus, and she didn't have the answer for it. When I was reading this item on the agenda, there was a mention about having demonstrated $75,000 in building improvements, and Jane, I wonder if you could speak to that, or if anyone could speak to that, or what was the significance of that. I
That's
couldn't read
a
it.
requirement of these types of licenses. Although this is the applicant, it's actually going to be a type C liquor license that this applicant will be ultimately getting. It's a requirement
Okay,
of these licenses.
that particular type of license.
And
okay.
so at our meetings, staff from the city attorney's office, Lieutenant Bush from the police department, the fire marshal, building inspector, the treasurer, lots of staff are in the room advising us, and the clerk's office, let's see, who am I missing? Anyone? All review these applications and have to sign off and be okay with this before we recommend approval to council.
Thanks.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thanks briefly. So these DDA licenses have certain stipulations, as Councilwoman Lum said, and there's no limit on them, unlike a Class C type license, that we can have a lot of these if they meet these requirements. And it's actually, I'm not sure how supportive I am of that, and yet they exist. And so, and I think this one is basically taking over and expanding an existing lower a beer and wine type license. They're adding liquor to this, and so I think this is an appropriate use of that above all others, because it's in the same location and everything, and I think that's fine. And they've shown in their other locations that they haven't any problems. So, but it was curious to note at this latest meeting that when we look at the total amount of liquor availability, liquor licenses, either a license, Class C license, vendor's license, beer, wine, whatever, tavern license, there's basically one place to get a drink for every 500 people in this town. And I don't know how that compares to other communities, but it was kind of a shocking figure. So for every 500 people, there's a bar, a party store, whatever, a restaurant that serves, and it just, it's a lot. And it seems like a lot. I don't know how that compares to other things, but just off the top of my head, I thought, wow, that's very convenient.
Further discussion? Councilmember Rumlowy.
Appreciate it. I do also sit on this committee. There is actually a cap on these type of DDA licenses. It's close to 1,000. It's not necessarily unlimited, but over 900. And from what I was told by Ms. Boudry, I think the calculations to get to that number, they included the TIF, the amount of TIF, that's captured and amongst other things, I believe. So just wanted to make a correction. It's not unlimited, but it is pretty darn high.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. DC 6, resolution to rename the East Stadium bridges located between the 500 and 700 block of East Stadium Boulevard to the John D. Dingle Jr. Memorial Bridges. Moved by Councilmember Ackerman, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DC 6. It's my, I'm delighted to be part of bringing this resolution forward. As folks in the community know, we in Ann Arbor had the pleasure of being, and the honor of being represented by John Dingle for a number of years, from around 2000 or so to 2015 when he left Congress. Of course, succeeded ably and honorably and with verve and vigor by Mrs. Dingle, by Representative Dingle. John Dingle holds a place in addition in Ann Arbor history, of course, but more importantly in American history, as serving as the longest-serving member of Congress in United States history, which is truly an incredible thing. John Dingle served his district, his state, and the nation with dignity and courage and passion and integrity, and he was everything that you'd want a legislator to be, and a true friend to his constituents. During his life, it was contemplated how we would honor him after his service. Requests that he always poo-pooed. Not interested was he in honors such as this. However, he did have a fondness for the bridges. The bridges at the stadium bridges were in many respects the result of his strong work. We, for years, were having difficulty in obtaining the necessary funding to improve the stadium bridges, to repair the stadium bridges. But with his able aid, we were finally able to receive a $13.9 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation, from the university, as if, from the United States Department of Transportation. And the bridges were finally replaced. It is righteous and fit that we honor Mr. Dingle by naming these bridges after him. We are coming upon the one-year anniversary of his passing, and I think it's appropriate that we pass this resolution today, so honoring him, and by extension, bringing forward the naming of the bridges, which too will ensure that his memory is long. Further discussion, Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the honor of working as then just Debbie Dingle's special assistant in 2014 in her first congressional campaign. And for those of you who know her or have heard of her, you know that she works tirelessly, and every moment that she's in district, she spends getting from one place to the next to be with her people. And that meant that her days started at 6 a.m. and ended at 9 p.m., which meant my day started at 6 a.m. and ended at 9 p.m. At her house in Dearborn. And one of the highlights every day was getting to see John's face when he was here in district and not carrying on his obligations in D.C. He had this immense ability to make whoever he was speaking to feel special, and that comes with an immense amount of humility for who people have called the most powerful man in Washington never elected president. To be built like a football player and have developed the relationships, authority, and influence that he had over his life, to make the person he was looking at feel the way that they did, as special as he made them feel, takes an incredible amount of humility that he carried with him every day. And with that, you wouldn't know what he's done. If you were to list his accomplishments, among them would be helping to pass Medicare and Medicaid, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, the Affordable Care Act. There's so many things that he did behind the scenes to help constituents for 59 years, 10 of which he represented Ann Arbor. It would take 59 years to list them all. Among examples of these are the ways in which that he fought for his constituents to make sure that we have the safe infrastructure we need to thrive. or a state-of-the-art train station in Dearborn, state-of-the-art international airport just 25 miles from here, and a stadium bridge that we struggled to repair ourselves. And we owe a tremendous amount to him. It just stands testament to how he put his country, his constituents, his family, his friends, and his staff before himself every day of his life. And this is a small nod to that sacrifice. So, thanks.
Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Ackerman. Your personal experiences of having had this incredible opportunity and exposure to the Dingles, Congressman and Congresswoman Dingle, is nice to appreciate through your, again, firsthand experience. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it was an incredible experience. And I would just like to ask to have my name be added as a sponsor. I'm sure that this will probably be, everybody here sitting at this table will probably make a similar request because this is appropriate, certainly, and his record of service, 59 years of service, is extraordinary and worthy of recognition. Congressman Dingle is certainly worthy. It's a very well-written resolution, and I found it worth reading over just to remind us of his incredible life and service. So thank you very much for initiating this and for bringing this forward, and to all the sponsors. And thank you for adding my name.
Councilmember Amlawi.
Thank you, and I appreciate the words and the comments that have been spoken on the former congressman, a champion of people, no doubt. And I just will make this brief. I just want to be added as a co-sponsor. It's only fitting that we're renaming a bridge. I think it's symbolic. He was able to bridge the differences, bridge the gaps, get effective legislation passed in our country that affected millions of people. So again, just very fitting that we will remember him in so many great ways, and this resolution is really well written. Tremendous accomplishments by Mr. Dingle.
Councilmember Hayner.
Well, thank you. I just have a technical question. So that bridge has a plaque that was dedicated when it opened, and are we going to replace that or amend it with another plaque, or how's this going to happen? And just out of curiosity, does the money have to come from streets or general fund? I mean, I fully support this notion. I'm just curious. Does anybody know?
I'll leave that to staff.
Okay. I mean, only because I know that, install a plaque might be a couple grand,
Craig Cupey, Public Services Area Administrator. We haven't discussed it in detail, but my first thought would be that we would add the plaque to it, and it would be coming out of streets.
Oh, okay, thanks. it didn't say, so I appreciate it. What's that? Well, I mean, I think it's great. I mean, I certainly had my opportunities to meet Mr. Dingle, and, I supported many of the notions that he supported over the years, so I'm all in favor of this. And League of Conservation voters consistently rank him very high, and it's all well and good. He's done great. He did good work for our community, so.
Councilmember Smith.
Clearly, we wouldn't have built those bridges without his help, so please add me as a co-sponsor.
Councilmember Nelson.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor as well. I only moved to town in 2004 when that bridge was famously falling apart, and so the story is legend of Mr. Dingle getting the funds to fix that bridge for us, and it's the best bridge in Ward 4.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yeah, I had many conversations with John Dingle the last few years of his life, and they were always memorable, and I always looked forward to his perspective and guidance. And I remember after our president was elected, most recently, people were really depressed. I had friends that literally would not get out of bed for 2 days. They were just so depressed. And so I said to him, I said, well, I think that your perspective on this is different because you've lived so long and you've lived through World War II and all these other wars. And so from a historical perspective, this really isn't that bad. And he looked at me and said, yes, it is. And that's all he said, and that just was so powerful. So I am thrilled that we're naming the bridges after him.
Further discussion? Councilmember Bannister, then Lum.
Just a quick, I would also like to be a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Councilmember Lum.
Just very quickly, one of the things Councilmember Ackerman mentioned is that when you or anyone spoke with Congressman Dingell, you felt that you were all his, I guess, if that's an okay way to put it, but that he was entirely focused on you, what you had to say, was a great listener. And as we well know, at a recent meeting, Congresswoman Dingell said, there's a reason we have 2 ears in one of these. So listening is important. And I will just say when, the various tributes that were made to Congressman John Dingell after he passed away, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, so a conservative writer, made that very same observation. Turns out he and Congressman Dingell were fast friends over the years, and professionally, personally, and he made that same observation. I think that's very, very meaningful, and speaks to the integrity of the man and his ability to bridge differences with various folks, and that is sorely lacking in so many of our lives today. So just adding on to what Councilmember Ackerman observed about his wonderful experience in working with the congressman.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is approved, and let the record show it is unanimous. DB1, resolution to approve the Hosford annexation, 2.56 acres, 2260 Traver Road, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion, please, of DB1. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because of scheduling conflicts, no member of the planning staff was able to join us tonight. If you have questions, they invited council members to postpone if they felt the need. They'd be happy to join for the next meeting.
Councilmember Hayner.
Well, yeah, or I'd also be happy to answer them. This parcel is, it's scores very high. It's excellent location for adding to our parks. It protects a watershed at the end of our parks. It's, it was had for a reasonable price, and I think everybody feels that the importance of this is, especially the watershed, it's sort of undeveloped parcel by most senses because of its runoff into the existing, kind of pseudo wetlands there. And I don't know. I think it's a decent deal for the city. I had wished that we could have come to agreement on all three parts of this parcel, all three parcels that make up this entire property, but it just wasn't there for the house. And so I just encourage us to go ahead and vote for this. I think it's a good addition to our park system. It's going to expand them in a way that I think is appropriate.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
I got Councilmember Ackerman, then Lum.
Just to clarify, this is a residential property.
Yeah.
Well, I believe it, Julie. I believe it, or Councilwoman Grand. The address.
It's my is it okay? My understanding is that this is the piece that was the residential piece, and the other part was the park piece. So this is the residential piece. They don't have access to sewer water, so they're asking for it and asking to be annexed into the city. I believe this was the.
Annexation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. This is not a purchase, it's just the.
Right, there's not a purchase.
Annexing the other piece in.
I've got Ackerman and Lum.
Well, that's going to price it right out.
That was my comment.
Councilmember Lum?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is, I think we should act on this, because it's just a garden variety annexation, if you will. The petitioner requested annexation because the septic is failing, and they want to hook up to the city sanitary, and it's within the city water sewer district, and it'll be proposed as R1B, which is consistent with the adjacent zoning and land uses. So hence, the staff and planning commission support.
So,
Councilor Hayner?
I'm sorry for my confusion on this. So, how are we going to, where are they running that? Where are they going to run that from? I'm just curious how this physical connection to our water and sewer is going to happen out there in the middle of Nowheresville. Is it coming from across the street through Leslie, or, I'm just curious. That seems like it would be, I'm glad they're asking. Usually, we know these annexations aren't always into it. But these are all township islands. So I'm just curious how that,
I mean, no, it's, I mean, if
utility's
I.
going to go down.
if I
Councilor
could-
Ackman, if you
And
have the
again,
answer.
I'll say.
I know planning took a better look, obviously,
Yeah,
so.
I'll say again, if need be, we can postpone and questions can be answered offline.
That's fine.
I mean, I'm looking at the map, and it's, pretty solidly in the city. I would imagine it's gonna come through either on Traver or through one of the adjacent neighborhoods to the northeast. But I'm not gonna be the one laying the pipe, so I don't know.
It's all unimproved road, is why I'm asking.
Okay.
I don't have a problem moving forward. I was very curious to hear that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. DS1, resolution to appropriate $5,000 in the general fund to fund additional tasks associated with the Comprehensive Transportation Plan Update Project and to approve an amendment to the professional services agreement with Sam Schwartz Consulting in the aggregate of $356,870. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DS1. Councilmember Griswold.
I talked to our city administrator before this meeting about another option that would eliminate the need to spend this money. And I think we postponed this, and there's been some question about exactly what was asked for and what was being delivered. And my goal was that we be able to realize a reduction in our crash rate by implementing Vision Zero. And while we have a Vision Zero program and we have people working on a transportation plan, we have not yet realized any significant decrease in our crash rate yet. Whereas an option would be to work with Grand Rapids, where they are 2 years ahead of us in implementing Vision Zero and have realized a significant reduction in pedestrian crash rates in 2018. I don't have the 2019 numbers. But I will defer to the city administrator because he does have a relationship with the city administrator in Grand Rapids, and they seem quite willing to share some of their success.
Further discussion, Councilmember Ackerman.
Wasn't there mention of postponement?
I'm sorry, I must have been spacing out.
No, not now, but at the beginning of the meeting, there was mention of postponement.
There was, but there's been no motion to postpone that
I
item.
move, well, it sounds like there might be a competing resolution or a competing idea coming forward. So,
I would just like to defer to the city administrator to make a comment first.
should we just vote this
Since
down?
it is a staff resolution.
Council passed a resolution several months ago
In October.
asking us to engage with Sam Schwartz to do an evaluation of some of our non-motorized infrastructure. We've gotten into a little bit of a circular discussion because the cost is more, I think, than council envisioned to have Sam Schwartz do it. The merits of what was asked for are certainly valid, and we want to comply with direction from council as a whole, but we also want to be prudent as it relates to expenditure of city funds. Ms. Griswold approached me, as she just mentioned, that in Grand Rapids, they have some expertise on staff who may be willing to assist us rather than us pay more money than was initially envisioned. Mr. Washington, who's the city manager in Grand Rapids, and I have a very strong relationship. We've talked about staff exchanges in the past, so I think Ms. Griswold's recommendation is a good one, that we should go and talk to the folks in Grand Rapids, see if we can benefit from their expertise. That will require a change in the resolution council passed, because we take direction from council as a whole. But I think it is a case where a little bit of taking the time to see what our peer cities are doing may be beneficial, will be beneficial.
I think I still have the floor. So do you recommend that we postpone or vote this down?
I think because council passed this as a whole to give us direction, I would recommend that we postpone, and then if we come back, we'd have to change the resolution the council initially adopted.
How long would you like to do those two
I'm going to
things?
see Mr. Washington this week, and I can talk to him then.
So 2 weeks from?
2 weeks is fine.
Great. I move to postpone this to our next meeting.
Seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion. Councilmember Lum.
So, of course, I'll support the postponement, but I have to say, in terms of the circuitousness of this conversation about this, it's not abundantly clear to me what it is we're postponing this to accomplish. So it sounds like we're going to go off, talk to the folks in Grand Rapids. But it's not clear to me how they will do our assessment of the pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. I mean, I'm not, again, I'll support postponement, but I think throughout, staff has been responsive to the direction that council has given them. At the January 21st meeting, when this was postponed, the direction at that meeting was that the intent of the original resolution, which was, we passed that in October, was to get an assessment of the infrastructure, not an assessment of the staffing resources. Then staff asked Sam Schwartz to come back with a revised proposal, and that's what their January 28th proposal did, and the substitute resolution reflects. So I, for one, supported the original, council resolution in October because I thought it was important to get an assessment of the infrastructure. And I supported the postponement at the last meeting because I agree with my colleagues that that proposal missed the mark. It was focused on staffing and the resources rather than an assessment of the physical infrastructure. I appreciate that staff has been responsive to the direction at the last meeting. So staff then asked the consultant to come up with a revised proposal, which they have now done. And so they've given us this substitute resolution. Again, I'm not crazy about spending an additional $22,000, but if we're going to do a transportation update properly, it seems we need to include an assessment of the pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. And it's not clear to me how, so we're going to postpone this in 2 weeks. What are you going to nail down with Grand Rapids or other benchmark cities that will get us there to that kind of assessment? Mr. Hess, can you speak to that, perhaps?
I don't think Mr. Hess has been involved in the conversation. What Mr. Hess did was, as you described, brought back the proposal from Sam Schwartz that was compliant with council's direction. And we're prepared to do that. It is an additional
I think that's what you've done.
$23,000. If we choose not to do that, we can discuss the scope of work with staff in Grand Rapids and see if they have the capacity to essentially meet the gist of what council asked for.
To do this assessment for us? Is that what you're saying, or suggesting, or proposing?
That's what I have, that's what I'm guessing.
Councilmember Ramlani.
Yes, very circular here. You know, when we're spinning our tires, I think, at least I feel like I am on this issue. With respect to what council asked for a few months ago, this resolution does not address that issue per se. I know we have that option under option 3 that does require additional money, $26,200. And I think that actually will address what council asked for months ago. This $5,000 frankly falls short with all due respect. I understand we are given options, and I appreciate options to weigh out and give us perspective. But I would request and ask for that option 3 be given as an option when this comes back, because this $5,000 option really doesn't address much. It just spends $5,000. If I can just weigh in on that issue, I just don't think that's really worth our time or the money being spent. And I do appreciate, Grand Rapids' assistance in helping us be more effective at addressing our issues, our goals, and what is needed to do that.
If I could have Mr. Hess speak, because I think the list in the posting is a little bit misleading because it's bringing back what was posted last time, but the body is different.
Right, Raymond Hess, Transportation Manager. So to Mr. Lazarus's point, I think there is some version issues to follow on this. It's, there is a substitute resolution which introduces kind of a version 3.2, for lack of a better term. That's the one that I think Councilmember Lum was speaking to a moment ago as well. And it does kind of replace the $5,000 resolution with a new scope from Sam Schwartz that is slightly modified. It's $21,700 as opposed to the $26,200. That scope was modified slightly based on the direction we got from City Council at the last meeting. So I just wanted to clarify, I think the reason why the 5,001 is still the one in the packet is just probably parliamentary, quite frankly, because that's what was on your agenda last time, and it was postponed until now. So that's what the agenda item reads, but there is a replacement resolution that would, I think, address the issue you're bringing, which is close to option 3, but slightly modified as well.
So in order to get from point A to point B the quickest, would it be advisable perhaps to vote this down so we can get to what we really need to get to in the quickest time possible?
I think, as I stated, we're prepared to go forward and execute the amendment with Sam Schwartz if that's the will of council in accordance with the resolution that they passed. There's an option that may prove to be equally effective that may cost less, that one of the sponsors of the original resolution asked us to look at. We can do that as well, but it's our intent to comply with the direction we get from council as a whole.
I appreciate the opportunity to guide the ship here, but I think it needs to be, we need a little bit more assistance from our city administrator in letting us know what path is the most effective. Otherwise, we continue to go in circles.
Well, with that regard then, I haven't had the chance to speak with anybody from Grand Rapids yet. So I don't think this is particularly time sensitive, so I don't think there's anything wrong with, I know it's annoying, but waiting a couple more weeks to see if we can establish the collaborative relationship with the staff there, which would probably be more beneficial long-term as opposed to bringing somebody in from out of town and then them going home. But we could continue to exchange the best practices. So, but again, I want to be careful not to not comply with what council asked us to do.
Got Councilmember Eaton, Ackerman, Hayner, then perhaps we can call it a day on the postponement.
So I want to draw my colleagues' attention to the packet addendum that has the substitute resolution. And I think that the substitute resolution gets us much closer to what we asked for in October. But I would point out that it has 5 tasks for a total of $21,700. And I question the need for task 4 or 5. We gave the direction. I would hope that after the assessment is done, it's brought back to us, because that's who asked for it, rather than taking it to the Transportation Commission. I think that we could reduce the numbers of hours of work and the cost of this. And so if we postpone this, I hope that we would again focus on what we originally asked for in October, which I think is task 1, 2, and 3 in the proposed substitute resolution.
Councilmember Ackerman.
No further comment.
Councilmember Hayner.
My question is purely procedural. I don't understand why, I understand that there's an alternate resolution associated with this, but the resolution that we'd be voting either to postpone or accept or reject is not that. And so, I know the notion is we're going to postpone this, it's going to come back properly before us, something we can actually vote on, or we're just going to vote on the $5,000, because that's what's before us in the printed agenda, and that's what's before me in the electronic agenda, except for that one has the attachment 1, 2, and 3. But what we would be voting on is the whereas and the resolve clause that says 5,000. And so it's a procedural question. Are we or are we not voting on this? You put something before me to vote on, it's got to be what we're voting on. So I'm postponing 5,000, hoping it comes back differently. Is that what you're telling me?
Councilmember Lum.
What has been moved to be postponed is the DS1 substitute resolution, which is option 3. It's an attachment, and it's to appropriate $21,700 to amend this agreement and appropriate this money to amend this agreement with Sam Schwartz Consulting. And I do appreciate the clarifying direction provided by Councilmember Eaton on the tasks that are enumerated. And I don't know how many hours and the associated costs tasks 4 and 5 would represent, but that sounds like a fine recommendation to me to ask the consultant to provide an assessment of the pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure, which would involve the first 3 tasks, and then, we have the report. And that should be, I would hope, sufficient. And
Further-
save a few more dollars.
Further discussion of the postponement. Councilmember Griswold, then Hayner, then maybe we vote.
I want to reiterate that I think that we should follow the lead of the city administrator and postpone this and see what can be accomplished without additional funding. $21,000 is $21,000 that we could be using for streetlights, for painting crosswalks, for actual infrastructure, and that is much better spent if we have that option.
Councilmember Hayner.
I'll say what happened when this came before us last time, that I don't feel that it's comprehensive. It didn't include the things that we're asking for. So I'll support the postponement or the voting down this notion. I can't believe that we don't maintain and haven't had our own inventory of bike lanes and crosswalk signage and all that stuff. Then why do we need somebody else to tell us what it is?
Further discussion? Roll call vote on the postponement, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton? Yes. Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Malawi?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we have communications today from our city attorney?
No, Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Rumlawi. Discussion of the clerk's report. All in favor? Opposed? The clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, Adam Oxner from Ward 4. I emailed you all about the Mobility Commission resolution or council, or whatever committee, Mobility Committee, and the Communications Directive for city staff, urging you to, specifically the Communications Directive, vote that down. I'm okay with the postponement of the mobility resolution because it seems like the intent was not to subvert the Transportation Commission. But I would like to request more clarity over what's, when that comes back from Councilmember Griswold, more clarity about what exactly the intent is with the, it seems like it's probably dealing with external, like the state or something, but using more specific words about mobility. Mobility is a very general term, and specifically what that would involve. And then for the communications with city staff motion, I'd rather see that voted down because, as I said in my email, I think the city staff are operating in good faith, and if there's problems with things slipping through the cracks, making it up to council, I'd rather see more procedural guidance, maybe from the administrator or something, than requirements to CC council on an email, which seems like very, it seems like a blunt tool for the job, whereas more, something more procedural or not just CCing on an email would be better and seem, if I were a city employee, I would be intimidated by the fact that I would be required to CC effectively my bosses or the city council on things that I'm not yet ready to bring to them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hello, everyone. I think by now that y'all know like what issues are really important to me, what I think needs to be addressed. So I hope I'm not sounding like a broken record every time. But I've been looking at some stuff online, reading some articles that I happened upon, and one is from Finland. I don't know if anybody has heard that they're the one country in Europe who's have cut homelessness down like substantially. The figures are staggering. And one outcome of that was that they use a Housing First initiative, which has been used in some cities in this country. They actually took that and expanded upon that. Whereas instead of telling a homeless person, you need to get a job, you need to, go to rehab, do all this stuff, and then you'll be able to find a place to live. The Housing First, the city has, and the whole country increased the supply to a point with low-income housing, giving people a place to live, and then they're, with a roof over their head, they're able to take these other steps. And so that brings me to just a personal anecdote of over the spring, summer, I saw this young man, about 23 years old. He was with a big bike and a huge backpack, stuff of all of his possessions, walking around every day, just asking people for money. I'd give him a couple dollars here and there when I could. And I sat down with him a couple times and talked to him for a couple hours collectively, and kind of, his father had committed suicide when he was 16, and from his brother he got into heroin and was dealing with drug addiction since that time. And just one day I was like, I know there is services available in the city and the county, and I looked some things up, and I kind of went around with him to a couple different places. And then I didn't see him for, about 6 months, until last week. And he didn't have a bike, didn't have a big backpack. He said he had just gotten out of rehab. He was in for about 6 months. He's in transitional housing. He looked like a totally different person. His mother had kind of disowned him because of what comes with the addiction issues and everything. And he said they had been talking together and developing their relationship. So, yep.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications from council? Do you have a closed session today? Oh, I'm sorry, do you have Councilmember Hayner?
Yeah, thank you. I know he's not here anymore, but I want to speak to the gentleman who had the concerns with the city and the police, and Ann and I spoke about this because I believe it was the same person who came running down to the front of the lecture the other day at Hill Auditorium with Mr. Ibrahim with a sign saying that he felt he was being framed, and I'm really sorry for his troubles, and what's going on there from our understanding is that there's been a mix-up with some information in the lien system, which is monitored by the state, and that the city of Ann Arbor doesn't have anything to do with that. We can't go in there and modify those records or make the change to that record. Apparently, fingerprints and other identifying data were switched. And so I just wanted to let him know that the chief is aware of this, and the assistant deputy chief, and the folks on IT there, and they're doing what they can to make that recognition out through the force that, hey, this isn't the guy, different guy, there's been a mix-up. And I can't speak to everything that's going on there, but I wish he was still here. I would give him assurances that, that we're aware of his situation, and I'm sorry for his troubles. You know.
Further discussion, further communications from council, Councilmember Bannister.
Just a quick announcement that hopefully by the February 18th meeting, we will be bringing forth an integrated pest management and turf grass resolution for you all to consider. The Environmental Commission approved it, and so now it's back with staff getting ironed out, and it's mainly an education and outreach effort where we would use the existing Parks Department integrated pest management for procedures, and going into the spring here, encourage Ann Arbor residents and owners of large turf grass to minimize their pesticides and chemicals on our lawns.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I just saw a lot of positive comments on social media today about the owners of Chelas and wanting to support their business due to their really brave and important contributions that they made talking about racial discrimination in in some of our local schools. So, and I also, have seen some comments that make it sound like it's maybe just one community where that happens, and I think it's important to recognize that this is an issue that impacts all of us, but was really pleased to see lots of support for those individuals and that business, because they do wonderful things for our community, and just wanted to express my appreciation.
Further communication from council. Do we have a closed session today?
Yes, Mayor. Excuse me, we have under the Open Meetings Act, we have one matter tonight for pending litigation, and I would like the clerk to reflect in the minutes, as she always does. The matter is on the Washtenaw County case involving Gelman and the state of Michigan, in which the city is one of the intervening parties.
We have a motion, please, to go into closed session, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Hayner.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister.
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yes.
Councilmember Lum.
Yes.
Councilmember Grant.
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Romali.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We're in closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are back in open session. DC1, resolution supporting the Environmental Protection Agency's active involvement in the Gilman site and encouraging its listing of the same as a Superfund site, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion of DC1, Councilmember Hayner.
I'm going to move that we postpone this until the first meeting in March.
Is there a second?
I know we bounced it down, oh, go ahead.
Seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion, Councilmember Hayner, you stole the floor.
I know we bounced it down the road a couple times, but we have quite a dynamic going here, a lot of moving parts, and I would appreciate everyone's support in setting this off one more 30-day period, or even less than that.
Further discussion?
Which meeting?
First meeting in March.
First meeting in March.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yeah, regarding the postponement, that will also give us time to continue to work with the other parties involved, because it is important that we make decisions together and remain strong. Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is postponed. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Lum, second by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.